Welcome back to a class on literary criticism and theory. In this course, we will try and discuss what literary criticism and theory is. We will try to understand the origin of literary criticism and theory. We'll trace our discussion to classical and medieval criticism, where we will talk about Plato, Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas. We'll move to Renaissance and neoclassical criticism, where we'll have a discussion on Sir Philip Sidney, John Dryden, Samuel Johnson. And we will move further talking about Joseph Edison. For feminist criticism, we have Mary Wollstonecraft. We will have a quick survey of romantic criticism with specific reference to Wordsworth and Coleridge before we move to Victorian criticism. On your screen now, you see Block 1. The 4 units prescribed for your study are listed there. Welcome back to a discussion on literary criticism and theory. In this course, we are trying to have an understanding of what literary criticism and theory is all about. We will start our discussion with an introduction to classical and medieval criticism, where we'll specifically talk about Plato, Aristotle, and Aquinas. Then we'll move on to Renaissance and neoclassical literary criticism. Our focus here will be on Sir Philip Sidney, John Dryden, Samuel Johnson. We'll also have a look at Joseph Edison and Mary Wollstonecraft. In the case of Mary Wollstonecraft, we will have a study with specific reference to feminist criticism. As we move further, we will look into romantic criticism with very specific references to both William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. From here, we'll move on to Victorian criticism, where Matthew Arnold is prescribed for your study. And before your course ends, we'll look at Karl Marx and Engels' contribution to criticism and theory. And the course ends with a reference to Oscar Wilde. On your screen now, you see the 4 units from Block 1 reflected. Block 1, Unit 1 talks about the introduction to classical and medieval criticism. Here we talk about 2 classical contributors, Plato and Aristotle. And in the medieval part, we'll look at Thomas Aquinas. Under Block 2, as you can see on your screens, we will first have a background study to Renaissance and neoclassical literary criticism. We'll study Sir Philip Sidney with specific reference to the types of poetry that he talks about, the defense or the apology of poetry. Then we'll look at Dryden and Samuel Johnson. The prescribed essays are there in your SLM. I'll take you quickly to the contents page in a little while. Block 3 has 4 main contributors: Edison, Wollstonecraft, Wordsworth, and Coleridge. And the last block gives us a background to Victorian criticism. We have references to Matthew Arnold, Karl Marx and Engels, and Oscar Wilde. One quick look at your syllabus. The contents page is given there on your screens so that you can have a broad idea. You can also look at the prescribed text or what exactly is expected when we talk about Plato, Aristotle, or Aquinas, etc. Now let us go back to the slideshow. Before we start our discussion, let us understand what is it that we mean by literary criticism. The meaning of literary criticism in brief, in bulleted format, is available on your screens now. Literary art of analyzing and evaluating literary works. It is an interpretation of literature. We can say it is an understanding of a literary work On the other hand, literary theory provides a broader context to analyze, interpret, evaluate, understand, and find meaning in a text. We are going to discuss both literary theory in the slides to come. What is literary theory? It is a broad framework to evaluate a literary work, or we can say it is a body of ideas of methods used to interpret a literary text. This particular slide helps us to understand the differences between literary criticism and theory. On the left side of your screen, you have literary criticism listed. On the right side, literary theory. Literary criticism, as we told a little while ago, is interpreting, analyzing, and judging any work of art. It is the art of criticizing or evaluating a literary text. On the other hand, as you can see on the right side of your screen, literary theory is a framework for interpretation, for analysis, or for judgment. It informs critics how to criticize, evaluate a literary text. There is an error here. I'll take you further so that we can understand some approaches to literary criticism. One is the historical biographical criticism, where a critic evaluates a text on the historical background of an author. In which historical period did the author live? Did the historical period have an impact on the work? If so, how does our reading of the text impact? This is what happens in the historical biographical criticism. Then we have the moral philosophical criticism, which is based on ethical merits of a text. Does the text, the literary work, have some moral content to share with the readers? What are its ethical merits? Is it a religious text? Does it talk about something moral? Does it have a philosophical content? Another form of criticism is the sociological criticism, which is based on the social context of a text. The text is based in the society, in the social context. Let us say we are reading a novel like Pride and Prejudice. We can place it in the social context of the age and try to understand the text through sociological criticism. Marxist criticism, on the other hand, is very closely related to sociological criticism. It evaluates, but this is the difference here, it evaluates a text on the basis of oppression of class. Sociological criticism need not talk about the oppression. Marxist criticism talks about the class imbalance in society. It talks about the oppression of the underprivileged section. It talks about the politics of power. Psychoanalytic criticism, as the word tells us, is a study of the author's unconscious thoughts influencing his work. Suppose we are reading a work like D.H. Lawrence's Sons and Lovers or Rainbow. A psychoanalytic study of Sons and Lovers will bring forth fruitful results. Practical criticism is the study of a text without consideration to any other external factor, the sociological background, the biological background, the mind of the author are not taken into consideration. In new criticism, importance is given to the form of the text. To take you back, and there are many others. The three dots on the previous slide indicate that there are various others that we have not touched upon here. As we move from one unit to the other in the course of this lesson, we will take up the different approaches to literary criticism. We'll take into account various theories. But for now, let us look at the origin of literary criticism. Your syllabus starts with the classical period. We also talk about the medieval period. In the classical period, as we all know, there was great influence of the Greek language. But sample text presented there is Aristophanes' The Frogs. The probable date of this work is 405 BC. What do we have here? It is a discussion on the poetic and the dramatic merit in contemporary works, work contemporary to the writer, and it is also an evaluation of the poets and dramatists of the earlier ages like Aeschylus and Euripides. For more information on the classical period and the origins of literary criticism, please refer to page number 12 and 13 of your SLM. This period may be further divided into the Hellenistic period and the Pan-Hellenistic period. In brackets, some further information is given. The spread of Greek culture through the Mediterranean region and the Middle East, this is what we find happening. So there is evolution of the concept of mimesis. We'll come back to mimesis a little later. In the Pan-Hellenistic period, we have great works like Iliad and Odyssey. We find the growth and popularity of the epic here. We also find the concept of truth being presented here. From here, as we move into the medieval period, we find the influence of the Latin language and not of the Greek language. This may be further divided into three periods: the early Middle Age, the Carolingian Age, and the Middle Age period. Major works that we find in the classical period: Ars Poetica, or the art of poetics. We have Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, all belonging to the classical period. For Plato, it is the artists, the musicians who are the saviors of society. He does not like poets at all. One of his works is the Republic, which is in the form of a dialogue. Dialogue was a very popular format of writings in those days. A major work by Aristotle is Poetics, which is prescribed for your study. We'll take it up when we come to the relevant unit. In your syllabus, when we are talking about literary criticism and theory, we are focused on Plato. As I told you a little while ago, Plato wrote the Republic. He's famous for the concept of mimesis, for the theory of forms, and for his ideas on poetry. What is the Republic about? A little while ago, I told you Plato was a Greek philosopher. He is considered to be the founder of Western philosophy, which derives heavily from both Plato as well as Aristotle. He was a student of Socrates. In this work, Republic, it is his ideal state. There is an attempt to define the ideal state. As I told you, it is a dialogue. Between whom is this dialogue? It is a dialogue mainly between Socrates and Polemarchus. In this work, Socrates, who is the master of Plato, considers the dispute between philosophy and poetry. There are two main questions addressed by Socrates in this work. One is, what is justice? And most part of the work revolves around this question. Another question is the just person happier than the unjust person? Or what is the relation of justice to happiness? So these are the two main questions that are addressed by Socrates in the Republic. Now we come to this very important concept propounded by Plato. It is a Greek term and it means imitation, as you can see on your screens. Let us understand what mimesis is before we move on to the other slides. We will need to know mimesis in detail. It is important. Mimesis is a term that we use in philosophy, that we use in literary criticism and theory. It is the process, or it describes the process of imitation through which an artist portrays and interprets the world. It is a way of thinking about a work. It is a way of thinking about a text. In general, what this word would mean, as I told you, is imitation. It is a representation in common terms. We continue to talk about mimesis in the present day because it is useful in an understanding of both Plato as well as Aristotle, because both of them adopted this term in their use of literary criticism and theory. The evolution of thinking on mimesis indicates both copy as well as imitation. In the modern day, what we say is that copying is bad. It is plagiarism. The UGC rules on academic integrity says that students should refrain from plagiarism. They should not copy anything from any other previous work and claim it as their own. But for both Plato and Aristotle, most literature is nothing but an imitation. There are two types of mimesis within poetry. One is vocal mimesis, or it is writing in a particular manner which represents the speech pattern that is very specific to a character. The other one is behavioral mimesis, in which a character responds to a particular scenario in ways in which are easy to understand. What are Plato's views on mimesis? Not just in the Republic, but in various texts, Plato discussed poetry and mimesis. In general, he looks down upon both. He saw poetry as something that is very inferior. In the Republic, when we are having a dialogue between Socrates and his pupils, where the philosopher argues that the artist's copy is an object that can only capture a very small part of the thing as it is, meaning what the poet writes is twice removed from reality. Let us, for example, take what do we take? The idea of a chair. Let us say a poet wants to talk about chair. All of us, when we are having this class, I'm sure each one of us is seated on a chair. So for Plato, this chair that we are sitting on is the second one. There is an eternal idea of the chair, which is the ideal. Based on that, we have the carpenter who has produced the chair. Now, a poet talking about the chair is twice removed from the reality. It is an imitation of an imitation. Just give me a second. Let us move and try to understand this theory of forms as proposed by Plato. Other than mimesis, Plato also came up with this theory of forms. This is one of the important contributions of Plato to philosophy. It also helps us in an understanding of mimesis. According to this theory of forms, the physical world that we experience is not the reality. What we see around us is a flawed copy or an imitation, mimesis of the perfect eternal realm of the ideas or the forms. What are these ideas or forms that Plato talks about? These ideas and forms are, how do we understand them? They are objective, they are eternal, they are unchanging, and they are true objects of knowledge. So Plato believed that the forms exist independently of our human thought or perception, and these forms are the ultimate source of all reality. What we see in the physical world around us is just what I told you a little while ago. It is simply a reflection of the world of forms. It is the world of forms which is the main or the real source of all knowledge and truth. This theory of forms by Plato raises some very important questions about the relationship between what is sensible and what is intelligible. For Plato, one second. There are two very separate, distinct. One realm is the world of forms, the world of ideas, which is the reality. And the second is the physical world, which is just an imitation. It is not the reality. And if about this physical world around us, it is twice removed from reality. The relationship between these two realms, the realm of the forms, ideas, and the physical realm, is the main concern of Plato's theory of forms, because it raises questions about the nature of perception, cognition, and the human mind. When we talk about relationship between the sensible and the intelligible, it is not easy. It is very, very complex. How do we come to know the world around us? According to Plato, our senses can only provide us with knowledge of the physical world. And this physical world is constantly changing. So we do not know whether we should depend on our sensations, our sensibilities or not. So then what is true reality according to Plato? According to Plato, true reality does not exist in the physical world around us, but it can be found in the world of forms, which, as you can see listed on your screens, is objective, eternal, unchanging, intelligible, and where we can find the true objects of knowledge. Apart from theory of forms, we get to know about Plato's ideas on poetry and poets. Plato held music in greater esteem and the other arts in greater esteem, but held a very negative view of poetry. For Plato, poetry, the second bullet point on your screen, is twice removed from reality. When we were talking about mimesis, I explained to you how it is twice removed. We have the main idea. For example, Wordsworth in the poem Daffodils talks about a field of daffodils. There is one idea, which is reality, of a field of daffodils. Then there is the physical field of daffodils. Imagine the physical field of daffodils and writes. So he's twice removed from the ideal, the idea, or the reality. Why does Plato dislike poetry? The three reasons are listed there. One, because for him, poetry is twice removed from reality. It is not a depiction of reality as this. And because, according to him, it fed our desires and passions instead of removing them. This is more of a moral perception. Poetry should remove our desires and passions rather than feeding them. That is why it does not. After he lived in the classical period, he believed in the concept of multiple gods, and he says that poetry lies about gods and it tells immoral stories. This is Plato talking about his contemporary times, talking about writers who lived before him. And he finds that poetry is literature, does not talk the truth about the creators. It does not talk the truth about the stories that are depicted in it. And the stories that are depicted are not moral stories. They're immoral. Hence, he holds a very negative view about poetry or literature. In fact, Plato completely banished poets from his Republic. The Republic is the ideal state that is discussed or presented in the work by the same title. If this is clear to you about Plato, poetry, the theory of forms, I will take you slowly backwards. If what we discussed until now about Plato and poetry, about his theory of forms, about the concept of mimesis is clear to you, some background about, we also talked about his work Republic. What are the questions raised by Socrates as he's in a dialogue with his different students here? What is the Republic all about? Ideas revolving around Plato that are a part of your syllabus. These are all that we have discussed so far. Apart from having a look at what is literary criticism, what is literary theory, we also looked at Plato and his contribution to criticism. Unit where Aristotle's Poetics is prescribed for your study. A little while ago, I told you how when we study Aristotle, Aristotle's concept of tragedy and the elements of tragedy are important for our study. On your screen, you find listed the elements of tragedy: plot, character, thought, fiction, song, and spectacle. These are the main elements that go into the formation of a tragedy. There are various other things that Aristotle talks about when he defines a tragedy. In our class later in the evening, we will have a discussion on tragedy as defined by Aristotle, the pyramidical structure, the 5-act play, the importance of the story being set in 24 hours, the plot should be the presence of the chorus through whom we have access to several songs.